The courtroom was usually a place of loud objections and shuffling papers, but on this Tuesday you could hear a pin drop. It happened in a split second. The moment Judge Nolan Barrett looked down at the 19-year-old defendant, Tyrell James, and asked a simple question about his family. The answer didn't just stun the room. It froze the blood in the judge's veins. In that silence, a 20-year-old secret came rushing back, bringing with it a tidal wave of karma that no gavel could silence. This is the story of how a judge's past finally caught up with him. The air conditioning in the fictionalized version of the Broward County Courthouse was failing again, leaving the air thick, heavy, and smelling faintly of floor wax and desperate sweat. It was late afternoon, the time of day when justice tends to get impatient. Judge Nolan Barrett sat high on his bench, a position he had occupied for nearly 15 years. He was a man who looked every inch the part, silver hair perfectly coiffed, a jawline that seemed carved from granite, and eyes that could bore holes through a liar's defense. To the public, Judge Barrett was a pillar of the community, a hanging judge known for his maximum sentences and zero-tolerance policy on youth crime. He often said, "If you're old enough to pull the trigger, you're old enough to face the consequences." But today, Nolan was tired. The docket was endless. Petty thefts, drug possession, probation violations, faces he would forget before he even took off his robe. "Next case," Nolan grumbled, rubbing his temples. "Docket number 4492B, the bailiff announced, his voice droning. State versus Tyrell James. Charges, aggravated assault and grand larceny." The heavy oak doors swung open, and a young man was led in. Tyrell James was 19, though he looked younger. He was thin, wearing an oversized orange jumpsuit that swallowed his frame. His wrists were shackled, the chains clinking softly as he shuffled toward the defense table. He didn't look like the thug the police report described. He looked terrified. His eyes were wide, darting around the room before fixing on his shoes. Representing him was a public defender named Sarah Higgins. She was overworked, underpaid, and currently shuffling through a stack of papers that looked like they had been dropped on the floor and hastily reorganized. On the other side was District Attorney Harrison Knox. Knox was the shark of the district. He was young, ambitious, and had his eyes set on the mayor's office. He wore a suit that cost more than Tyrell's family made in a year. He tapped his pen on the table, looking at Tyrell with a mixture of boredom and disdain. "Mr. Knox," Judge Barrett said, his voice booming without the need for the microphone. "Let's get this moving. I have a dinner reservation at 6. Knox stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, this is an open and shut case. The defendant, Mr. James, was apprehended 2 blocks from the scene of the crime. He matches the description of the assailant who attacked a store owner and stole $500 from the register. We are asking for the maximum penalty. We need to send a message." Sarah Higgins shot up. "Objection, Your Honor. Matches the description is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. The description was a black male in a hoodie. That could be half the city. My client has no prior record. He's an honor student. He was walking home from the library." Judge Barrett sighed. He had heard the library excuse 1,000 times. It was almost a cliché in his courtroom. He looked down at Tyrell. The boy was trembling. "Mr. James," Barrett said, his voice sharp. "Look at me." Tyrell slowly lifted his head. When their eyes met, Barrett felt a strange, inexplicable prickle on the back of his neck. There was something familiar in the boy's face. Not the boy himself. Barrett was sure he had never seen him. But something in the structure of the brow, the shape of the jaw. It was a ghost of a memory he couldn't quite place. "You understand the charges against you?" Barrett asked. "Yes, sir," Tyrell whispered. His voice was deep, steady, despite the fear. "And how do you plead?" "Not guilty, sir. I didn't do it. I swear." Knox scoffed audibly. "They never do, Your Honor. We have security footage." "We have grainy footage of a shadow," Higgins argued back. "It proves nothing." Barrett raised a hand to silence them. He looked at the file in front of him. Tyrell James, age 19. Mother, deceased. Father, unknown. The unknown bothered him. Usually these files had at least a name, even if the father was absent. "Mr. James," Barrett asked, leaning forward, "your file says you live with your grandmother. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Mrs. Hattie James." Barrett paused. The name Hattie James rang a bell, faint and distant, like a church bell heard from miles away. "And your parents?" "My mum passed when I was a baby," Tyrell said, his voice cracking slightly. "And your father?" Tyrell hesitated. He looked at his lawyer, then back at the judge. I don't know him, sir. My grandmother never talks about him. She says he's a mistake." Knox chuckled. "A mistake. Sounds like the apple didn't fall far from the tree, Your Honor. Absent father, criminal son. It's the cycle." "That's enough, Mr. Knox," Barrett snapped. He wasn't defending the boy, he just hated Knox's smugness. But the feeling of unease was growing in Barrett's gut. He looked at the boy again. The way Tyrell held his chin up, defiant yet respectful, it reminded him of someone from a long time ago. "Counselor," Barrett addressed the public defender, "you mentioned he's an honor student?" "Yes, Your Honor. He has a full scholarship to Stanford starting in the fall. He's the captain of the debate team. Does this look like a smash-and-grab robber to you?" Knox rolled his eyes. "Ted Bundy was a law student, Your Honor. Intelligence doesn't preclude criminality." "I want to hear from the grandmother," Barrett said suddenly. He didn't know why, but he needed to pull on this thread. "Is she in the courtroom?" "She is, Your Honor," Higgins said. She turned to the gallery. "Mrs. James?" From the back row, an elderly woman stood up. She was leaning heavily on a cane, wearing her Sunday best, a floral hat and a pressed navy dress. She looked frail, but her eyes were sharp. As she walked down the aisle, the clicking of her cane echoed in the silent room. When she reached the railing, she looked up at the bench. Judge Barrett's heart stopped. He knew her. He hadn't seen her in 20 years, and time had etched deep lines into her face. But he knew her. She wasn't just Hattie James. She was the mother of him. "Hattie," Barrett whispered, his microphone picking up the tremble in his voice. The old woman squinted at him, adjusting her glasses. Then recognition dawned on her face. It wasn't a look of warmth. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Nolan," she spat the name like a curse. "I should have known it would be you." The courtroom murmured. Knox looked confused. "Your Honor, do you know this woman? If there's a conflict of interest—" "Silence!" Barrett barked, his face pale. He ignored the prosecutor. He couldn't take his eyes off Hattie. "Hattie, this is your grandson?" "He is," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "And he's innocent, just like his father was." The words hit Barrett like a physical blow. The memory rushed back, violent and vivid. 1998. The Caldwell case. Nolan Barrett hadn't always been a judge. 20 years ago, he was a ruthless prosecutor, much like Harrison Knox. He wanted a win record, not justice. And his biggest win, the one that launched his career, was the conviction of a young black man named Gabriel "Gabe" Caldwell. Gabe had been accused of armed robbery. The evidence was flimsy, circumstantial at best. But Nolan had pushed. He had suppressed witness statements. He had charmed the jury. He had painted Gabe as a monster. Gabe was sentenced to 20 years. He died in prison 3 years later in a riot. Gabe was Hattie's son. And looking at Tyrell now, Barrett saw it. Tyrell was the spitting image of Gabriel Caldwell. "You," Barrett stammered. "He's Gabe's son?" "He is," Hattie said, her voice echoing through the stunned courtroom. "He was born 2 months after you sent his daddy away. 2 months after you twisted the truth to get your promotion." The courtroom was dead silent. The stenographer stopped typing. Even Knox looked uncomfortable. "I didn't know," Barrett whispered. "I didn't know he had a son." "You didn't care!" Hattie shouted, slamming her cane on the floor. "You didn't care about anything but your career. You took my son away. You killed him. And now you want to take his boy? You want to finish the job? Mrs. James, please." Sarah Higgins stepped in gently, sensing the volatility of the situation. "We need to focus on Tyrell." Barrett felt like the walls were closing in. He looked at Tyrell. The boy was staring at him, confusion morphing into realization. "You knew my father?" Tyrell asked softly. Barrett couldn't answer. He felt a wave of nausea. He had built his life on the idea that he was a guardian of the law, but the foundation was rotten. "Recess," Barrett choked out. He banged his gavel, missing the block and hitting the wood of the desk. "Court is in recess for 30 minutes. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over. Without looking back, he fled to his chambers, leaving a courtroom buzzing with confusion and a rising sense of scandal. Inside his chambers, Barrett ripped off his robe and threw it on the leather couch. He paced the room, his hands shaking. He poured a glass of water, but he couldn't drink it. Karma. He had always dismissed the concept. But here it was. The son of the man he wrongly convicted was now standing before him, accused of a crime he likely didn't commit, facing the same system that destroyed his father. There was a knock on the door. "Go away," Barrett shouted. The door opened anyway. It was Harrison Knox. "Nolan," Knox said, dropping the formalities. "What the hell was that? You know the family. You have to recuse yourself. If you don't, and you convict him, it's a mistrial. If you acquit him, it looks like favoritism. You're screwed either way." Barrett looked at the young prosecutor. He saw himself in Knox, the arrogance, the blindness. "He didn't do it, Harrison," Barrett said quietly. "What?" Knox laughed. "Based on what? The grandma's sob story. I have a witness." "You have a witness who saw a hoodie," Barrett snapped. "I remember the Caldwell case, Harrison. I remember how I built it. I see the same cracks in this one. The witness was unsure until the police pressured them, right? The footage is blurry." Knox's smile faded. "That's how the game is played, Nolan. You taught me that." "Get out," Barrett said. "Fine, but you better pull it together. The press is already sniffing around. If this blows up, it's your legacy on the line." Knox left. Barrett sank into his chair. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk. There, buried under old files, was a picture frame he kept face down. He turned it over. It was a photo of him and Gabriel Caldwell, taken years before the trial. Most people didn't know the full story. Before the robbery, before the trial, Nolan and Gabe had known each other. They had played basketball at the same community center. They were friendly. Not close, but friendly. Nolan had betrayed that friendliness for a conviction. He had used his knowledge of Gabe's habits to twist the narrative. He looked at the photo, then at the closed door. He had a choice. He could recuse himself, pass the case to another judge, who would likely believe Knox and send Tyrell to prison, repeating the cycle. Or he could stay on the case, risk his career, and try to find the truth. But there was a twist coming he couldn't foresee. As he sat there, his phone buzzed. "An unknown number," he answered. "This is Judge Barrett." "Hello, Nolan," a voice said. It was deep, raspy, and sounded like gravel grinding on bone. Barrett froze. He knew that voice, but it was impossible. "Who is this?" "You know who it is," the voice said. "You're looking at my son right now." Barrett dropped the phone. Gabriel Caldwell was supposed to be dead. Judge Nolan Barrett stared at the phone on his mahogany desk as if it had turned into a venomous snake. The line was dead. The caller had hung up, but the voice echoed in the silent chambers. "You're looking at my son right now, Gabriel Caldwell." Nolan's mind raced. He had seen the death certificate, coroner's report, State Penitentiary, 2001. Cause of death, blunt force trauma during inmate altercation. He had even felt a pang of guilt when he signed the paperwork closing the file on Caldwell's appeals. Dead men don't appeal. Was it a prank? Hattie James had just screamed that Nolan killed her son. She believed he was dead. Terrell believed he was dead. So who was on the phone? Nolan snatched the phone up and hit redial. No caller ID. He slammed it down again. He needed to get back into the courtroom. He needed to look Hattie in the eye again. If Gabe was alive, where was he? And why was he calling now? Nolan splashed cold water on his face in the small ensuite bathroom, recomposed his silver hair, and donned the black robe. It felt heavier now, like a shroud. He marched back into the courtroom. The atmosphere had shifted. The silence of shock had been replaced by the buzz of gossip. Reporters had arrived, sharks smelling blood in the water. "All rise," the bailiff called out, looking uncertain. Nolan took his seat. "Be seated." He looked at the defense table. Tyrell was whispering to Sarah Higgins. Hattie was sitting behind them, her face a mask of stone. "Miss Higgins," Nolan said, his voice steady but strained. "I have reviewed the preliminary motions. Regarding the conflict of interest—" The room held its breath. Knox was already standing, ready to argue for recusal. "I find that my past interaction with the defendant's family, while unfortunate, does not preclude me from overseeing a fair trial. However, given the gravity of the accusations and the personal nature of the history, I am going to be scrutinizing the prosecution's evidence with extreme care." Knox's jaw dropped. "Your Honor, you just admitted to a personal history with the defendant's father, a man you prosecuted. This is highly irregular." "I am the judge in this courtroom, Mr. Knox. Unless you have a motion to file with the appellate court right now, sit down." Knox sat, fuming. He whispered something to his assistant, who immediately began typing on a laptop. "Now," Nolan continued, "the prosecution claims they have a witness. Call them." "The state calls Mr. Timothy Ruggles," Knox announced. A nervous, balding man in a uniform shirt walked to the stand. He was the owner of the convenience store that had been robbed. "Mr. Ruggles," Knox began, slipping into his smooth, predatory rhythm, "can you tell the court what happened on the night of November 14th? "I was closing up," Ruggles said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "About 10 p.m. A guy came in, hoodie up, black mask. He had a knife. He told me to empty the register." "And did you see the attacker's face?" Not the whole face, but I saw his eyes, and his build. He was tall, skinny, like him." He pointed a shaking finger at Tyrell. "Let the record show the witness identified the defendant," Knox said smugly. "And what happened next?" "He took the cash, about $500, and he ran out the back door. And the police caught the defendant 2 blocks away, 10 minutes later. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "Thank you. Your witness." Sarah Higgins stood up. She looked tired but determined. "Mr. Ruggles, you said you saw his eyes. What color were they?" Brown. Dark brown." Mr. James has dark brown eyes. So do half the people in this room. Did you see any scars? Tattoos? No. He was moving fast. Mr. Ruggles, did the police show you a lineup? Yes. And did you pick Mr. James immediately? Ruggles hesitated. He looked at Knox, then back at Sarah. Well, not right away. I wasn't sure. But the officer, Officer Miller, he told me they found the guy running nearby. He said it was definitely him. So, you identified him after the police told you they had the culprit? Objection, Knox shouted. Badgering. Overruled, Nolan said sharply. Answer the question. Yeah, Ruggles admitted. They said they got him. So I signed the paper. Nolan leaned back. It was the exact same playbook he had used on Gabriel Caldwell. Find a suspect, coach the witness, close the case. Mr. Ruggles, Nolan interrupted. Did the attacker say anything else to you? Just, give me the money. Voice, Nolan noted. Did he have an accent? Was it deep? High? It was just a normal voice. Kinda quiet. Nolan looked at Tyrell. Mr. James, please say, give me the money for the court. Tyrell froze. I don't want to say that. Do it, Tyrell, Sarah whispered. Give me the money, Tyrell said. His voice was a rich baritone, distinct and resonant. Ruggles frowned. That sounds deeper than the guy. Knox looked furious. Your Honor, this is highly unorthodox. I am seeking the truth, Mr. Knox, Nolan said. Court is adjourned for the day. We reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Mr. James is remanded to... He paused. He couldn't send the boy back to the county jail. Not with what he knew. Remanded to house arrest. Electronic monitoring. He can go home with his grandmother. Knox looked like he was about to explode. Hattie James looked stunned. She didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped about an inch. As the gavel banged, Nolan didn't retreat to his chambers immediately. He watched Hattie and Tyrell embrace. He saw the fierce protection in the old woman's eyes. He had to know. Nolan waited until the courtroom cleared, then signaled his bailiff, Bring Mrs. James to my chambers. Alone. 10 minutes later, Hattie James sat on the leather couch in Nolan's office. She refused the water he offered. She just stared at him with those judging eyes. Why are you doing this, Nolan? She asked. Guilt? It's a little late for that. Hattie. Nolan sat on the edge of his desk. I need to ask you something crazy, and I need you to be honest. I've never lied. You're the liar. Is there any chance Gabriel is alive? Hattie's face crumpled. For a second, the anger vanished, replaced by pure grief. I identified his body, Nolan. I buried my son. I visit his grave every Sunday. Don't you dare play games with me. Nolan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. So she didn't know. That meant the caller was either a cruel prankster, or Gabe was alive and hiding even from his own mother. I received a call, Nolan said carefully. Someone claiming to be him. Hattie stood up, trembling. You are a sick man. You killed him and now you're haunting us. Stay away from my family. She stormed out. Nolan sat alone in the dimming light. He had to find out who made that call. He dialed an old contact, a private investigator named Mac McCready. Mac was ex-police, fired for being too honest. Mac, it's Barrett. I need a trace on a call I received at 4:12 p.m. And I need you to dig up the Gabriel Caldwell death file from 2001. Everything. Photos, coroner reports, witness statements. Caldwell. Mac's gravelly voice came through. The case that made you famous? Why dig up the bones, Artie? Because I think the bones are walking around, Nolan said. That night, Nolan drove to the address listed on Tyrell's file. It was a small, dilapidated house in the Narrows, a neighborhood Nolan hadn't visited since his days doing ride-alongs with the cops. He parked his luxury sedan a block away, feeling conspicuously out of place. He walked to the house. He didn't intend to go in. He just wanted to see. He saw Tyrell sitting on the porch steps, the ankle monitor blinking on his leg. The boy was reading a book. Nolan watched from the shadows of a large oak tree. Suddenly, a car pulled up slowly. A black sedan with tinted windows. It idled in front of the house. Tyrell didn't look up. The window of the sedan rolled down an inch. A hand reached out and dropped a small envelope on the sidewalk. Then the car sped off. Tyrell looked up, startled. He waited a moment, then ran down the path, grabbed the envelope, and ran back inside. Nolan frowned. What was that? A threat? Money? He rushed back to his car and followed the black sedan. It was heading toward the industrial district, the old shipyards. Nolan's heart pounded. This was reckless. He was a judge, not a detective, but the voice on the phone, the envelope, it was all connected. The sedan pulled into a derelict warehouse. Nolan killed his lights and parked. He watched as a man got out of the car. The man was tall. He wore a long coat and a fedora, obscuring his face. He walked with a limp. Nolan squinted. Blunt force trauma. If Gabe had survived a beating that severe, he would likely have a limp. The man stopped at the warehouse door and turned around. He looked straight at Nolan's car, hidden in the dark. Nolan froze. The man raised a hand and pointed a finger at Nolan. Then he vanished inside. Nolan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He picked it up. "You shouldn't have followed me, Artie." It was the voice. "Gabe?" Nolan whispered. How? How are you alive?" "The same way you're a judge," the voice replied. "Corruption, lies, a deal with the devil. Why are you calling? Why now?" "Because you have my son, and if you let him go down for a crime he didn't commit, the world will know everything. Not just about me, but about you. About what you really did to get that conviction in '98. Nolan's blood ran cold. The '98 case. There was one piece of evidence Nolan had buried, a witness statement that provided an alibi for Gabe. Nolan had shredded it. It was the one truly illegal thing he had done. "I have the copy, Nolan," Gabe said. "I have the original report you thought you destroyed. I've been holding it for 20 years. Waiting." "What do you want?" Nolan asked. "I want justice. For Tyrell. Fix this, Judge, or I burn your world to the ground." The line went dead. Nolan sat in the dark, staring at the warehouse. The ghost wasn't just haunting him. He was blackmailing him. But Nolan knew something Gabe didn't. This wasn't just about the past anymore. Nolan started the car. He had work to do. He had to save Tyrell James, not just to save his career, but because for the first time in 20 years, Nolan Barrett wanted to do the right thing. But as he drove away, he didn't notice the second car parked in the alley. A police cruiser. Inside, District Attorney Harrison Knox sat, watching Nolan's car leave. "Interesting," Knox muttered to himself. "Very interesting." He picked up his radio. "Officer Miller?" "Yeah. Keep a tail on the judge, and find out who owns that warehouse." The game was on. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. The air was charged with a static tension that usually preceded a storm. Judge Nolan Barrett took the bench, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. He looked out at the gallery. It was fuller today. Word had spread about the judge's outburst and the grandmother's accusation. Harrison Knox looked smug, shuffling his papers with the confidence of a man holding 4 aces. Sarah Higgins looked anxious, whispering to Tyrell, who looked more terrified than before. "Mr. Knox," Nolan said, his voice raspy. "Call your next witness." "The state calls Officer Miller," Knox announced. Officer Miller was a burly man with a buzz cut and a neck thicker than his head. He lumbered to the stand, swearing to tell the truth with a casual indifference. "Officer," Knox began, "you were the arresting officer?" "I was." "Describe the arrest." "I responded to a 911 call. I spotted the suspect running south on 4th Street. He matched the description. I pursued on foot and apprehended him." "Did he resist?" "He struggled, yes." "And what did you find on his person?" "We found nothing on his person at the time. He must have tossed the weapon and the cash." Sarah Higgins stood up for cross-examination. "Officer Miller, you say he struggled. My client has bruises on his ribs and face. Did he struggle, or did you tackle him and beat him?" "He resisted," Miller said flatly. "Force was necessary." "You said he matched the description. The description was hoodie. Did you see his face before you tackled him?" "I saw a suspect running." "Running? Or jogging?" "Tyrell is a track athlete. He jogs every night." "He was running from a crime scene." Nolan listened, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the warehouse, about the shredded document. He needed to stall. He needed time to find that document before Gabe released it, or worse, before Knox found out about it. "Officer Miller," Nolan interjected, "you said you found no cash on him. Did you search the route he ran?" "We did, Your Honor. We found nothing." "So," Nolan leaned forward, "we have a robbery where the money vanished, a weapon that vanished, and a suspect who happens to be an honor student with no record. Doesn't that strike you as odd?" Miller shrugged. "Criminals get lucky." "Or," Nolan said, "police get lazy." The courtroom gasped. Judges rarely criticized police officers so openly. Miller's face turned red. Knox stood up. "Objection! Your Honor is speculating and disparaging the witness." "Overruled," Nolan said. "I'm asking questions. Step down, officer." Nolan looked at the clock. 11:15 m. He needed to get out of there. "We will take an early lunch recess until 1 p.m. As the gavel banged, Nolan motioned for his clerk. "Cancel my lunch. I need to go to the archives." Nolan didn't go to the archives. He went to his car and drove straight to the address Mac, the PI, had texted him. It was a small storage unit on the outskirts of town. Mac was waiting there, leaning against a rusted pickup truck. "You look like hell, Artie," Mac said, flicking a cigarette butt away. "What did you find?" Mac handed him a manila folder. "Gabe Caldwell. Officially dead. Body cremated. Ashes given to the mother. But here's the kicker. The coroner who signed the death cert. Dr. Aris Thorne. He was fired 2 years later for taking bribes to falsify reports. So he could have faked it. For the right price. Yeah. But who paid him? Caldwell was a broke kid from the projects." Nolan opened the folder. He scanned the photos. The body in the morgue photos. The face was swollen, unrecognizable. It could have been anyone. "And the trace on the call?" Nolan asked. "Burner phone. Pinging off a tower near the shipyards. Same place you went last night. You followed me? I'm a PI, Artie. It's what I do. Now tell me what's really going on. Why is a dead man calling you?" Nolan sighed. He looked at the old friend. "Because I buried evidence, Mac. 20 years ago. A witness named Elias Thorne, no relation to the coroner, saw Gabe at a gas station 3 miles away at the time of the robbery. I made the statement disappear." Mac let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Artie. That's disbarment. That's prison time." "I know. And Gabe has the copy. He wants me to free his son, or he leaks it." Mac shook his head. "So what's the play? You rigged the trial?" "No," Nolan said. "If I rig it, Knox will sniff it out. I have to prove Tyrell is innocent for real. I need to find the real robber. In 2 days? Mac laughed. Good luck. I need you to find Elias Thorne, the witness from 98, if he's still alive. Long shot, but I'll try. Nolan drove back to the courthouse, his mind reeling. He entered his chambers and froze. Harrison Knox was sitting in his chair, feet up on the desk. Comfortable? Nolan asked, his voice icy. Knox smiled. He held up a piece of paper. It was a printout of a grainy photo. It showed Nolan's car at the warehouse the night before. Late-night drive, Judge? Knox asked. To a warehouse owned by a shell company, linked to a known criminal enterprise? I was investigating, Nolan said. Judges don't investigate, Nolan. They adjudicate, unless they're involved. Knox stood up, his smile vanishing. I know you're hiding something, and I'm going to find it. And when I do, I'm not just taking your seat. I'm taking your freedom. Knox brushed past him and left. Nolan slumped into his chair. The walls were closing in fast. He went back into the courtroom for the afternoon session. Defense, call your first witness, Nolan said. Sarah Higgins stood up. The defense calls Tyrell James. This was a risky move, putting the defendant on the stand. Tyrell walked to the stand. He swore on the Bible. Tyrell, Sarah asked gently, where were you on the night of November 14th? I was at the library until 9:30. Then I started walking home. Did you rob that store? No, Mum. Why did you run when you saw the police? Tyrell looked down. Because I was scared. In my neighborhood, when a cop car speeds up, you don't wait to ask questions. You run. It's instinct. Did you have a weapon? No. Tyrell, tell the court about the envelope. Nolan's head snapped up. The envelope from last night. Tyrell hesitated. I don't know what you mean. Sarah looked confused. Though, never mind. She clearly didn't know about the envelope. Knox stood up for cross-examination. Mr. James, Knox prowled toward the stand. You ran because you were scared, or because you were guilty. Scared? You're a smart kid, right? Stanford bound? Yes. Smart kids don't run from police unless they have something to hide. What are you hiding, Tyrell? Who are you protecting? No one. Is it true your father was a convicted felon? Objection, Sarah yelled. Relevance. Goes to character, Your Honor. Knox smirked. Sustained, Nolan said. Leave the father out of this. Knox leaned in close to Tyrell. I think you did it. I think you needed money for something. Maybe drugs? Maybe a girl. No, Tyrell shouted. Then where did the money go? Did you give it to someone? Tyrell's eyes flickered to the gallery. For a split second, he looked at a man sitting in the back row. A man Nolan hadn't noticed before. He was wearing a dark hoodie, his face obscured by shadows. Nolan followed the gaze. The man in the hoodie stood up and walked out of the courtroom. I didn't steal anything, Tyrell said, his voice trembling. Nolan made a decision. Mr. Knox, are you done? For now. Court is adjourned until tomorrow. Nolan didn't wait for the bailiff. He threw off his robe and ran out the back exit. He sprinted to the parking lot. He saw the man in the hoodie getting into a beat-up Honda Civic. Nolan jumped into his car and peeled out. He tailed the Honda. This time, he wasn't going to a warehouse. The Honda drove deep into the city, pulling up to a pawn shop. The man got out. He was carrying a bag. Nolan watched as the man went inside. Nolan waited a minute, then followed. Inside the pawn shop, the man was arguing with the clerk. Come on, man. This watch is worth at least $200. $50. Take it or leave it. Nolan stepped forward. I'll give you $500 for it. The man spun around. It wasn't Gabriel. It was a young kid, maybe 20. He looked strung out. "Who are you?" the kid asked. "I'm the guy who's going to ask you where you got that watch," Nolan said, "and why you were in my courtroom staring at Tyrell James." The kid's eyes went wide. He bolted for the door. Nolan, despite his age, was quick. He grabbed the kid by the collar. "Not today!" "Get off me!" the kid yelled. "Talk!" Nolan demanded. "Who are you?" "I'm Marcus, Tyrell's cousin." Nolan let go, stunned. "Cousin? Yeah, I was there, okay? I did it." Nolan stared at him. "You robbed the store? I needed the cash. I owe some bad people. Tyrell saw me running. He saw me. He ran to distract the cops so I could get away. He took the heat for me." The realization hit Nolan like a freight train. Tyrell wasn't protecting a criminal father. He was protecting his foolish cousin. He was sacrificing his future, his scholarship, everything, for family. Just like Hattie protected Gabe. "You're coming with me," Nolan said. "No way, I ain't going to jail." "You're going to confess," Nolan said, "or I'd drag you there myself." Suddenly, the front window of the pawn shop shattered. A brick flew in, landing at Nolan's feet. Wrapped around it was a note. Nolan picked it up. "Stop digging, or the boy dies in prison." Nolan looked out the broken window. The black sedan from the warehouse was speeding away. Gabe wasn't the only one watching. Someone else was involved. Someone who wanted Tyrell convicted. Nolan looked at Marcus. "We need to go. Now." He dragged the kid to his car, but as he put the key in the ignition, his phone rang. It was Knox. "Nolan," Knox said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I just got a very interesting email. It's a scanned copy of a police report from 1998. Something about a witness named Elias Thorne? Does that ring a bell?" Nolan's heart stopped. "It seems," Knox continued, "that you have been a very naughty boy, Judge. I'm sending this to the state bar and the press in, let's say, 1 hour. Unless what?" Nolan choked out. "Unless you declare a mistrial tomorrow and resign immediately." Nolan looked at Marcus, the key to Tyrell's innocence, sitting in the passenger seat. Then he looked at the phone. He was checkmated. Or was he? Nolan gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The pawn shop's neon sign flickered in the rearview mirror, casting a sickly red glow over Marcus's terrified face. "Who was that on the phone?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking. "Are they coming for me?" "Worse," Nolan muttered. "They're coming for me." Harrison Knox had the document, the smoking gun that proved Nolan had framed Gabriel Caldwell 20 years ago. If Knox released it, Nolan's career wasn't just over. He would face prison time. His legacy would be destroyed. He would go down in history as a corrupt villain. But if he resigned and declared a mistrial, Tyrell would be retried by another judge, likely one in Knox's pocket. Tyrell would go to prison. Marcus would go free, continuing his life of petty crime until it killed him. And Gabe would probably carry out his threat to burn everything down anyway. Nolan looked at Marcus. "You're going to tell me everything. Now." "I told you. I robbed the store. Tyrell saw me. He told me to run. He put his hood up and ran the other way to draw the cops. He's too good, man. He's always trying to save everyone. Just like his father," Nolan whispered. "His dad? Tyrell thinks his dad was a bum who left him. Tyrell is wrong." Nolan started the car. He couldn't go to the police station. Knox controlled the police narrative right now. He couldn't go home. They might be watching. He needed a safe house. He drove to an old motel on the edge of the highway, the kind of place where people paid in cash and didn't ask questions. He checked them into a room that smelled of stale smoke and bleach. "Stay here," Nolan ordered Marcus. "Do not open the door for anyone." "Where are you going?" "To make a deal with the devil." Nolan drove to the courthouse. It was 11 p.m. The building was dark, looming like a tombstone against the night sky. He entered through the judge's private entrance. He walked to Knox's office. The light was on. He pushed the door open. Knox was sitting there, a glass of scotch in his hand, the printed email of the 1998 report sitting in the center of his desk like a trophy. "You're early," Knox smiled. "I gave you an hour. I'm not here to resign," Nolan said, closing the door. "Oh? Then you're here to beg? It's not a good look for you, Nolan. I'm here to tell you that you're playing a game you don't understand." Nolan walked up to the desk. "You think this document destroys me?" "It does. But it also reopens the Caldwell case. A case that involves other people. People more powerful than me. People more powerful than you." Knox frowned. "What are you talking about? Who do you think pressured me to bury that evidence in '98, Harrison? You think a rookie prosecutor makes that call alone?" The police chief at the time was terrified of a race riot. The mayor wanted a conviction to look tough on crime. That mayor is now the governor. Knox's smile faltered. "If this comes out," Nolan bluffed, leaning in, "I go down." "Sure, but I take the governor down with me, and the entire DA's office, and you're the one holding the grenade." It was a lie. Mostly. The pressure had come from his boss, who was dead now. But Knox didn't know that. Knox was ambitious, and ambitious people are paranoid. "So what?" Knox sneered. "I'm the whistleblower. I'm the hero." "You're the liability," Nolan corrected. "If you release that, you end your political career before it starts. The party will crush you for exposing their dirty laundry." Knox stared at the document. He took a sip of scotch. "So what's the offer?" "I finish the trial. Tyrell James walks, because I have the real culprit." "You found the robber?" "I did. And it's not Tyrell." "If Tyrell walks, I look incompetent," Knox argued. "No, you look like a seeker of justice who found the truth. You spin it. DA's office uncovers real perpetrator, exonerating honor student. You get the headlines, you get the credit. And the document?" Knox tapped the paper. "You keep it, as insurance, but you never release it. And in exchange, I retire at the end of my term. Quietly. The seat is open for you to run for judge in 2 years." Knox swirled his drink. He was calculating. He wanted the win, but he also wanted the judgeship, and he was afraid of the governor. "Bring me the real guy," Knox said. "Tomorrow morning, before court opens. If he confesses, we cut a deal. If not, I hit send." "Done." Nolan turned to leave. "Nolan," Knox called out, "does the governor really know?" Nolan didn't look back. "Ask him yourself, if you dare." Nolan returned to the motel. His heart was hammering. He had bought time, but he had to get Marcus to confess on record. He opened the door to the motel room. The room was empty. The window was broken. "Marcus!" Nolan shouted. The bathroom door creaked open. Standing there wasn't Marcus. It was the man in the fedora and long coat. The man from the warehouse, Gabriel Caldwell. He stepped into the light. The right side of his face was scarred, burn marks and jagged lines from an old beating. He leaned on a cane, but his eyes, they were the same eyes Nolan saw in Tyrell. "You lost him, Judge," Gabe said, his voice a low rumble. "Gabe," Nolan breathed, You're real. I'm real, and I just watched my nephew get snatched." "Snatched? By who?" "By the same people who paid the coroner to fake my death, the syndicate. They run the drugs in the Narrows. Marcus owed them money. That's why he robbed the store. They took him, and they'll kill him if Tyrell doesn't take the fall." Nolan sank onto the bed. This is a mess. It's a war, Nolan, and you started it 20 years ago when you put me away. I lost my life. I couldn't be a father to Tyrell. I had to watch from the shadows while he grew up." Gabe limped closer. "But you have a chance to fix it. You have to save Marcus and Tyrell. How? I don't know where they are." "I do," Gabe said, "but I can't go in there. They know me. They think I'm a ghost. But if they see me, they'll finish the job. You're a judge. They won't expect you." "You want me to storm a drug den?" Nolan asked, incredulous. "I want you to use your power. You know the police captain? Captain Miller? The arresting officer's father." "Yes. He's on their payroll. That's why the evidence against Tyrell was so flimsy but stuck. That's why the witness was pressured." Nolan felt the ground shift beneath him. The corruption wasn't just in the past. It was happening right now. "What's the plan?" Nolan asked. Gabe pulled a gun from his coat, a revolver. Nolan recoiled. "I am not taking a gun. It's not for you to shoot," Gabe said. "It's for evidence. This is the gun Marcus used in the robbery. He dropped it in the alley. I found it." Gabe placed the gun on the bed. "Take this to the state police, not the locals. Go to the superintendent. Tell him Miller is dirty. Tell him where Marcus is." "And where is Marcus?" "The old shipyard. Warehouse 4. The same place you saw me." "Why are you helping me?" Nolan asked. "I ruined your life." Gabe looked at Nolan with a mixture of pity and resolve. "Because Tyrell is innocent. And because, 20 years ago, before the trial, we were friends, Nolan. I remember that guy. The guy who played basketball with me. I'm betting my son's life that that guy is still in there somewhere." Gabe turned to the window. "Go. You have until dawn." He climbed out the window and vanished into the night. Nolan looked at the gun. He looked at his watch. 2 a.m. He grabbed the gun, wrapped it in a towel and ran to his car. He drove to the state police headquarters, an hour away. He demanded to see the superintendent, flashing his judicial badge. Superintendent Vance. Wait, no Vance allowed. Superintendent Ross was awakened and brought in. Nolan laid it all out. The corruption, the false arrest, the kidnapping of Marcus. He left out Gabe. He couldn't explain a dead man. He said an anonymous informant gave him the info. Ross was skeptical. "You're accusing a captain of the MPD of kidnapping and framing a kid?" "I'm betting my gavel on it," Nolan said. "Raid the warehouse. If Marcus isn't there, I resign tomorrow." Ross stared at him. "Let's roll." 4 a.m. Nolan sat in the back of an armored SWAT vehicle. They breached the shipyard gates. "Police, get down!" Flashbangs, shouting, gunfire. Nolan waited, his heart in his throat. 10 minutes later, the radio crackled. "Secure. We have 3 suspects in custody, and 1 hostage. A male, approximately 20 years old." Nolan jumped out of the van and ran into the warehouse. There, cuffed and crying, was Marcus. "Judge!" Marcus yelled. "They were going to kill me!" Captain Miller was there too, in handcuffs, shouting obscenities. "You made a big mistake, Barrett," Miller screamed. "You don't know who you're messing with." "I think I do," Nolan said calmly. He looked at Marcus. "You're going to tell the truth, son. Everything." "I will, I swear." Nolan walked out into the dawn light. He checked his phone. 1 text from Knox. "Tick-tock. Judge." Nolan typed back, "Checkmate. See you in court." The courtroom was packed to capacity. The news of the early morning raid had leaked, and the atmosphere was electric. Reporters were practically sitting on each other's laps. Judge Nolan Barrett entered. He didn't look tired anymore. He looked energized, a man with a clear purpose. Harrison Knox sat rigidly at the prosecution table, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He had heard whispers of a raid, but no one had told him the details. He still believed the document he carried, his insurance, might save him. All rise. Be seated. Nolan Barrett glanced toward Tyrell. The boy looked lost, unaware of what had happened to his cousin. Mr. Knox, Nolan began calmly, before we proceed, the court has received important new information. Knox stood abruptly. Your Honor, if this is about rumors— Not rumors, Nolan interrupted. Facts. This morning, State Police raided a warehouse and rescued Marcus James. He has given a sworn statement confessing to the robbery and explaining how Tyrell created a distraction to protect him. A wave of gasps filled the room. Tyrell froze. Hattie James covered her mouth. Nolan raised a file. Captain Miller has also been arrested for conspiracy and kidnapping. Evidence shows an effort to frame this defendant to conceal a drug debt. Objection! Knox shouted. We haven't reviewed this. Nolan's gaze hardened. Do you wish to continue this prosecution, Mr. Knox? Knox scanned the courtroom, the cameras, the reporters, the watching public. He knew he was trapped. Your Honor, the state moves to dismiss all charges. Dismissed with prejudice, Nolan declared, striking the gavel. Mr. James, you are free. The courtroom erupted. Tyrell collapsed into Sarah's arms. Hattie wept openly. Order, Nolan said quietly. Mr. James, step forward. As Tyrell approached, his shackles were removed. I owe you an apology, Nolan said. For this case, for a system that failed you. Loyalty should never cost someone their future. Thank you, Your Honor, Tyrell replied. Nolan paused, then reached beneath the bench and produced an old file. 20 years ago, he said, voice steady. I secured a conviction by hiding evidence. Gabriel Caldwell was innocent. Shock rippled through the room. I am vacating that conviction and submitting my resignation, Nolan continued. I am sorry for the life I destroyed. He removed his robe and folded it carefully. Court is adjourned. Walking into the sunlight outside, Nolan felt the weight of 2 decades finally lift. His career was over. His punishment awaited. But for the first time, he was free. Nolan's life in the following months was quiet. The legal battles were fierce, but he refused to hire a high-powered defense team. He took his punishment. The public respect for him, ironically, grew. He became a symbol of accountability. One rainy afternoon, Nolan was sitting in his small apartment, reading a letter from Tyrell. Tyrell was doing well at Stanford. He had joined a pre-law fraternity. He wanted to be a defense attorney. There was a knock at the door. Nolan opened it. No one was there. But on the doormat was a basketball, an old, worn leather basketball. Nolan picked it up. Written on the side in black marker were 2 words, Game On. Nolan smiled, tears filling his eyes. He looked out into the rain. Somewhere out there, the ghost was still watching. And for the first time in 20 years, Nolan Barrett was finally free. What a powerful ending. It really makes you think about the power of truth and the weight of our past choices. Judge Barrett lost his career, but he saved a life and regained his humanity. Do you think he deserved forgiveness, or was his past crime too great? Let's discuss in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into courtroom drama and redemption, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We post new stories every week that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next case.